The girl's mood was simply amazing. The morning began with an invigorating coffee and cheerful greetings from the staff. Viola walked briskly around the office, clacking her heels. Viola sat down at her work computer and began to put her current affairs in order. Harris Green, the director of the company, would be here soon. Footsteps were heard. The employees greeted the boss courteously. Viola also respectfully greeted the director, bowing her head low. In their team, Harris Green was feared by absolutely everyone. The director asked Viola to bring the project application. "What an amazing man! He's been rude since this morning, but no one is going to ruin this day for me," Viola thought to herself. Today was an extremely important day for Viola. A 16-inch doll from her favorite cartoon series was being auctioned. The girl had wanted to buy it for a long time. Viola reported to the director that everything was ready for the moment. She warned all the employees to come 5 minutes before the meeting started. The director interrupted her almost halfway through the meeting. He asked Viola to invite Branton from the technical department. "Hopefully now you'll invite the right Branton to join me and not like last time." The principal reminded Viola again of her gaffe. He had one negative character trait. He remembered all the mistakes of his subordinates. The girl was really pissed off by this attitude of the principal. Yes, she had made a mistake. The girl brought the principal an ordinary battery. Instead of the name Branton, she heard that the principal needed a battery. But that was years ago. She was just a rookie secretary. The fact that the girl brought the battery made the principal very angry. He asked her if she was not ashamed to be paid for such an attitude to work. The director said he would be happy to receive her resignation any time. That day she cried all evening. She was very ashamed. She really thought about quitting. Since that time, Viola had disliked her boss, though she recognized that he was still holding his own in the industry because of his character. To somehow drain her negativity, the girl kept a diary book. In it, she described her relationship with the director in the form of a fairy tale. A new chapter in the book appeared almost every night. Pouring out her emotions on the pages of the book, she felt better. "I wonder if there's any chance that the principal will ever read my book," Viola thought as she walked to the tech department to invite Branton to see the principal. Viola was approached by her co-worker Maria. She offered her help. Viola replied that everything was ready. She could handle everything herself. Viola didn't know that everyone in the company admired her hard work and responsibility. Many thought she was the best at what she did. The bids for the doll were growing very fast. Viola even began to worry that she wouldn't be able to buy it. The phone screen lit up with a message that the battery was low. Viola frantically started looking for a charger in her purse. She quickly put the phone on the charger, but Viola still didn't make it. The doll was sold out. The girl blamed her principal for everything that had happened. If he hadn't sent her to the technical department, she would have been able to keep an eye on the bid, and most likely the doll was hers. "He's a right pain in my ass. I'm so tired of him," the girl said, half-voiced. "Who are you talking about, Miss Lehman?" Viola was heard after all. Suddenly, the principal appeared beside her. The girl began feverishly going over options in her head to answer her superiors. "Can we talk now, Miss Lehman?" the principal asked smilingly. The girl had no choice but to agree. "Miss Lehman, did you gather feedback from the departments that were at the meeting yesterday?" the principal asked the girl. Viola answered him that yes, she had everything ready. She handed him several folders containing reports. Harris looked through a few reports. He was satisfied with the girl's work. He allowed her to go to her workplace. The girl sighed with relief. This time everything ended well for her. On her lunch break, Viola was calming down her employee Maria. She asked the girl not to be afraid of the boss. "He's a normal person, so you shouldn't flinch at his every phrase." Maria admiringly noted that the director was especially good today. She asked Viola if she noticed how perfectly his suit fit him. The girl froze with a cup in her hands. She hadn't expected such revelations from her employee. Viola said she didn't discuss such nonsense in the workplace. She turned around to leave. Maria asked her if she was not attracted to the director as a man. Maria noticed that Viola's secretary had become like her director. She started to be rude to the staff. Viola noticed that such words sounded like insults. If to tell the truth to herself, Viola liked the boss. At first, she even fantasized about him. The director was a young man, attractive in appearance. He was always collected and demanding at work. Viola imagined that he was rude at work, but quite soft to the woman he loved. She even fantasized about how their relationship might work out within the walls of the office. The girl was pulled out of her romantic musings by a phone call. It was the director calling. He wanted to postpone the meeting for 10 minutes. Viola hung up the phone and thought to herself that let her fantasies remain fantasies. Mentally, she sympathized with the girl who would marry him. Viola often saw her boss in anger. He was a hothead, often snapping at his subordinates. He didn't like it when others made mistakes. Work always had to be perfect. Watching the director once again yell at a new employee who made a mistake, Viola remembered herself. She had been through the same thing. There was no room for romantic fantasies in such a work atmosphere. The director sighed heavily and asked Viola to get him a glass of water. Matthew tried to calm the chief down. He asked him not to waste his emotions. Anger would never lead to good. No, but have you heard what they say? Do they even think before they open their mouths? I only demand a perfect result. Principal Harris Green continued to freak out. You see, it's not always the employee's fault for not keeping up. Sometimes you set a really fast pace. It's hard for them to stick to it. Trying to smooth the edges, Matthew said. I don't know, my secretary, Miss Lehman, keeps up with me and my pace, said the principal in an irritated voice. Matthew advised Harris, looking at Will's pictures. That should have calmed him down. Harris noted that Will was growing up to be a smart kid, very much like him in personality. Matthew noted that it was no surprise, since Harris's sister was a very smart girl. Viola entered the study with a glass of water. For a moment, she stood still. The headmaster was holding a book. It was familiar to the girl. The girl experienced a shock. She didn't understand where the principal had gotten it. After all, the book had not had much success. Nobody bought Viola's diary book. Only libraries bought one copy each. Viola put a glass of water on the table. She heard the principal say that this book was not a success, but Will liked it very much. Thank you, of course, to the unknown Will for appreciating my work, but I'd better get going, the girl thought to herself and quickly bowed out. I want to ask you to find the author of this book for me, asked Harris to Matthew. This request was heard by Viola. She was shocked. Why would the principal want the author of the book? And what would he say when he found out it was her? Oh, Violet Grimm, the girl in the mask. Matthew scrutinized the cover. And why do you want the author? I just want to meet her and talk to her, Harris answered him. Matthew turned his head to the side and saw that Viola still hadn't left. Harris asked the girl why she was still here. Maybe she needed something? The girl smiled again, apologized, and hurried out of the office. Closing the office door, the girl leaned against it. She was breathing heavily. Viola could feel her common sense leaving her. Viola sat down on the floor and wrapped her arms around her head. The girl absolutely did not understand why the director wanted to meet with the author of the book. What did he want to talk to her about? Matthew came out of the office. The girl asked him to have a cup of coffee with her. Matthew handed Viola a cup of coffee. The girl confessed to Matthew that she had heard the principal ask him to find the author of a children's book, and an unpopular one at that. She pretended to be amused. So why would he want the author of a book? Did he tell you what he wants to talk to her about? As if offhandedly, Viola asked. Matthew admitted that he didn't know the principal's purpose. He was only required to find an author, so he was going to start with a publisher. Viola told Matthew that she needed to get back to work. What she really wanted to do was dial her publisher Sophie as soon as possible. The phone on Sophie's desk just went off. Someone had been looking for her persistently for several minutes now. Sophie yelled out that she was on her way. Sophie was surprised by the call. Viola warned Sophie that she would get a call after a while asking about the author of the book. The girl asked the publisher that under no circumstances should she give out her name and phone number. So what? I'm supposed to keep quiet about the author even if a fan asks? What do you even have going on there? Sophie inquired. Please don't ask me anything. Just do as I asked you to do. It's a very long story. I'll tell you about it afterward. For now, don't tell anyone anything about me, Viola asked. You know, I can't promise you anything. If a man is as handsome as Apollo, I won't be able to resist telling him all the secrets. So sorry, no guarantee here, said Sophie, and quickly hung up the phone. Harris was leafing through a book called The Girl in the Mask. It was nothing special to him. It was just an ordinary book for kids. But kids like weird things, so he wasn't surprised. This book showed up at their house 2 days ago. Harris came home and was met in the living room by Will's nanny. She tells him that the boy has locked himself in his room. He was upset about something, but wouldn't tell her. Harris knocked on the boy's room and asked the boy to come out to talk. He tells Will that he is sad without him. He came home from work and wants to hug him badly. The ruse worked. The boy came out of the room. He was a crying mess. With a cry of joy, the child threw himself into Harris's arms. Harris decided to ask the boy what could have happened that he couldn't hold back his tears. Could someone have hurt him? After eating all the sweets and drinking all the juice, the child calmed down. Now he was ready to talk about what had happened to him. Will told Harris that all of his friends had their moms come to pick them up and take them home. Will doesn't have a mom. He lives with his uncle. Sometimes a babysitter picks him up. The child admitted that he misses his mom a lot. "Uncle Harris, you know what I've been thinking? You should get a girlfriend," Will suggested excitedly. Harris stammered, asking the kid why he needed a girlfriend. Will revealed that he's going to school soon, and he wants his mom to drive him to school. She will also do his homework with him. And if Harris has a girlfriend, she can replace his mom. Harris decided to put the child to bed. He gave him the first book he could find. Most likely the babysitter had bought it. "You know, I thought Violet would be a good girl for you," said Will and held out the book to his uncle. Harris promised the child that he would definitely talk to the author of the book and ask her if she wanted to be Will's mom. Harris decided to take a closer look at the book. He didn't understand what it was that the author had gotten the kid hooked on. Harris read the first page. There was a message from the author. The writer told him that she worked a regular job and her book was about how an ordinary girl met her Harry. How she has to wear a mask because he scares her. Weird, the intimidating boss is named Harry, thought to himself Harris. Viola berated herself for ever deciding to write a book. When she had the idea, she was going through hard times at work. The girl made mistake after mistake. The director was almost constantly yelling at her. One day, when Viola was still new to the company, she was late for work. The girl decided to eat breakfast on the run. Viola ran into the first supermarket she could find and bought a bun without looking. She had breakfast at her workplace while sorting documents. Viola didn't notice how the director came to her desk. She tried to quickly hide the uneaten bun, bowed to him, and wished him good morning. The director was furious. He saw Viola eating a bun prepared by a competitor. The director didn't understand how his personal secretary could afford such a thing. In his eyes, Viola had betrayed the company. After that, a new chapter about little bully Harry appeared in Viola's book. Viola brought the director some documents to sign. On his desk lay her book. "Miss Lehman, have you read this book?" the principal asked Viola. "I think what is old for children's books." Lowering her eyes to the floor, Viola answered him. "You know, and I flipped through this book yesterday. I got the impression that its author works in an office and has a terrible boss. Do you think I'm a terrible boss?" Suddenly, the principal asked, raising his eyes to Viola. Luckily, Matthew walked into the office. He brought the principal coffee. Matthew handed out cups to everyone present. The girl thanked him with a smile. Did the principal get hurt by the words "from the author"? Viola thought, taking another sip. "Drink up, Miss Lehman. It will help you be more productive at work." The principal couldn't resist a sarcastic remark. The coffee was starting to get to Viola's throat. "Why are you being so rude to Miss Lehman?" Matthew asked Harris in the car. "Take today, for example. You asked me to buy different flavors of coffee so Viola could choose, but afterward you sassed her. Why couldn't you just tell her please when she thanked you?" Harris didn't have time to respond to Matthew as his cell phone rang. It was Will's nanny calling. The baby had been admitted to the hospital. Harris flew into the hospital room. The doctor told him there was no reason to panic. The child simply had a fever, and it was quite normal for his age. Will woke up and saw Matthew next to his bed. His uncle wasn't there. The child became agitated about it. To calm him down, Matthew decided to read him a book. Next to the bed on the dresser was a children's book, The Girl in the Mask. Will asked Matthew if he could find the writer who had written the book. The boy really wanted to ask her some questions. Matthew asked the child why he wanted his uncle to have a girlfriend. "Because sometimes he looks very lonely. If Uncle gets someone, he'll be more fun," Will admitted. Harris entered the room abruptly, giving Matthew a big scare. He asked once again to find the writer. He wanted to please his nephew. Viola had a bad headache from the stress and had nightmares the second night. She was very worried that the principal would find out about her hobby of writing books. So she had to take painkillers. The principal called Viola into his office. The pills didn't help. Her headache was getting worse. The girl knocked on the principal's office. Harris told Viola that he couldn't find some documents. Viola reminded the principal that they should be in Matthew's hands. She asked if she should look for it. Harris replied that no, since Matthew was busy looking for the author right now. It wouldn't be worth bothering him. "Looking for a children's book author?" Viola shouted. "Yes, and why do you wonder? After all, you've heard yourself that I'd like to socialize with a writer," nonchalantly asked her principal. "Well, I was just wondering why Matthew was doing this personally. Why didn't you ask me to do it?" A little calmer asked Viola. "I didn't ask you to do it simply because I need you here at the workplace." Calmly, the headmaster answered her. Fear over her secret being revealed restrained Viola once again. She had worked very long and hard to hold this position. She didn't want to lose her job. The intense excitement made Viola dizzy, and she began to slowly settle to the floor. Strong male hands picked the girl up without letting her fall. "Miss Lehman, are you feeling all right? Can you hear what I'm asking you?" Harris asked excitedly. The supervisor's voice quickly brought Viola to her senses. She said she was doing fine. Harris asked her if she was sick. He put his hand to her forehead. The girl quickly bounced aside and said he was worrying for nothing. She wasn't sick, she was feeling fine at the moment. Harris advised the girl to go to a doctor and have her health checked. He asked her to take his words not as advice, but as an order. The girl told him that as soon as she finished her work, she would go straight to the hospital. Matthew called the publishing house and said that he wanted to contact one of the authors. He told him that his boss wanted to go on a date with the writer. "And which author are we talking about?" Sophie asked. After listening to the answer, the publisher said that it is not her right to distribute personal information about authors. If Matthew wanted to contact the writer, he would have to write a letter. Matthew realized that he would not get the information he needed from Sophie, so he decided to act differently. Matthew decided to come to the publishing house in person. Sophie came up to meet him. She asked Matthew if he was looking for Violet Grimm, the author of The Girl in the Mask. She motioned for Matthew to follow her into her office. Sophie stared openly at Matthew. She clearly liked this guy. He was definitely her type of man. Matthew had a face like a puppy face and long legs. "I apologize for being blunt, but you're quite a handsome man. So what brings you to us?" With a slightly shocked look on Matthew's face, Sophie said, "This lady is pretty weird," Matthew thought to himself. Out loud, he said that he just wanted the phone number of the writer Violet. Sophie reminded him again that they had no right to divulge their writer's personal information. She noted to herself that it was hard to say no to such a handsome man. Matthew decided to tell Sophie the whole truth. He said that his boss has a nephew who is a huge fan of The Girl in the Mask. "You know, I find it hard to believe that your boss wants to meet the writer just because of his nephew." With a slight smirk, Sophia admitted to him, "But I have one condition. I'll give you the writer's phone number if you go out with me." All decided to make concessions to the publisher. Matthew's eyes widened with surprise. Sophia laughed at the voice. She admitted it was only a joke, and no matter how much he asked her for help, she wouldn't be able to help him. With sadness in his voice, Matthew asked Sophia if he could give the writer their conversation if he couldn't give her phone number. Harris and Viola rode the elevator in silence. The girl thought that she could go to the doctor herself. She did not understand why the director went with her. The director explained his incomprehensible behavior by the fact that their company is worried about the health of its employees. Therefore, he personally wants to kill himself that Viola's health is fine. As Viola thought, she had an ordinary migraine, nothing threatening to her health. The doctor suggested that Viola lie under a drip. It would improve her condition. The girl refused because she was already uncomfortable with the principal trying to play the role of her father, or worse, boyfriend. "That's a great idea. You make a good point. Let Miss Lehman lie under an IV." "Ignore Viola," the principal said. The girl's IV was placed in the VIP ward. All expenses were covered by the company. Viola was very embarrassed by the fact that the director was next to her while she was under the IV. He still could not go home. The principal noticed the girl's embarrassment, so he asked her to relax and get some rest. He told her to ignore him. "Mr. Green, and I think you have a lot to do. You don't have to stay here at all." Once more, Viola tried to send the principal home. Harris did not utter a word. Viola collapsed exhaustedly on the bed. At this point, she couldn't affect the situation in any way. She had to accept it. As she fell asleep, she thought that if she had worked somewhere else, she would have quit. Viola began to come to her senses. Initially, she didn't even realize where she was. "Oh, you're finally awake," Viola heard her boss's voice beside her. God, why is he still here? Viola thought. But out loud she thanked the director for his help and support. The principal told her that he really hoped for her speedy recovery. He said that he didn't like doing recruitment. Therefore, he hopes to continue to cooperate with her. Harris rose from his seat and said he hoped to see Viola tomorrow at his workplace. With his head down, Matthew admitted to Harris that he hadn't been able to find out anything. The publisher was as stubborn as a donkey. With a sly grin, Harris said that some changes needed to be made to the quarterly donation plan. Sophie couldn't believe her ears. She hadn't expected anyone to want to buy up all the copies of the first edition of the children's book, The Girl in the Mask. But still trying not to give up, Sophie told Matthew that she had one condition. Sophie called Viola to share the happy news. A man had appeared who wanted to buy up all the copies of her book. Viola didn't understand why anyone would do that. Sophie explained to Viola in a joyful voice that Hansel's company had decided to buy up copies of the book and donate them to orphanages. The only thing is, they are asking the author of the book for an autograph session. Sophie was telling the girl that this was a great opportunity for her as a writer. "Sophie, can you please tell me who is the person behind all this?" Falling exhaustedly onto the collapsed bed, Viola asked. "I'll look it up in a moment. The name of the person who wants to buy all of Harris Green's books. If my memory serves me correctly, he's your boss." Looking at the notes, Sophie replied. In a faded voice, Viola admitted to Sophie that she had been trying to avoid seeing the principal for days now, but he still wouldn't back down from her. His nephew liked that book. Sophie tells the girl that it's too late to back out. That's how she gave her consent on her behalf. But she has an idea. She would have to go for a ruse. "By the way, Viola, you know that man who sought you out on behalf of his boss, right? Is he seeing someone?" As if offhandedly, Sophie asked. "Sophie, don't tell me you betrayed me for a man." Viola was jokingly indignant. But she admitted that Matthew was probably single because he spent so much time at work. Married people don't usually do that. Matthew's cell phone rang. The name on the other end was Violet. A woman's voice said that they would definitely do an autograph session, but that they would choose the location and time themselves. Matthew agreed to any terms. Joyful Matthew ran into Will's room. He told the child that he had succeeded. The boy would soon meet the author of the book The Girl in the Mask. The boy ran up to Harris and hugged him. He was very happy to meet the writer soon. He also told his uncle that he would see her soon too. Will shouted excitedly that as soon as the writer saw his uncle, she would immediately want to go out with him. Harris thought that he would finally see the face behind the author's name. He himself was already interested in meeting her. The autograph session was decided to be held in a children's cafe. The weather that day was sunny. Will's mood was amazing. The boy was constantly happily laughing and running without finding a place. Harris even began to worry about his nephew, so that he would not collide and not get injured. The children's room was completely empty. Harris decided that most likely there would be no one else at this meeting but them. Sophie came out to meet them. She introduced herself and offered to enter the nursery. To make the child feel comfortable, Sophie gave him a balloon. She told him that soon his dream would come true, and he would see Violet. Sophie noted to herself that Violet's boss was a handsome enough man, though not her type. "Wow!" the child shouted excitedly. "What the hell?" went through Harris's mind. Sitting in front of them was a girl wearing a large mask that completely hid her face. Harris figured the girl was either federally wanted or extremely ugly. He absolutely did not understand why she would hide her face at such an event. "I really liked the story of the girl Iris described in this book," Will candidly told the writer. The kid admitted that he had wanted to meet her for a long time and thank her for the book. The girl thanked the boy for reading her story and appreciating it. "You know, Sophie, and you fooled me after all. This isn't exactly what you and I agreed on. We discussed that there would be a book signing with the author of the book, not the character," resented Harris. "You see, Mr. Green, it's only a costume. Underneath the mask is a person, and it is the author of the book," attempted to justify herself to Sophie. Sophie also pointed out that the event was created for his nephew. If you look at the boy, you can conclude that the child is completely happy. He is satisfied with everything. Unexpectedly, Viola noted that she enjoyed spending time with the child. She also realized that the boss didn't recognize her in the mask, and that was good news. "Violet, can I ask you a question? Do you like anyone?" Will shyly asked the writer. Harris, hi, oh, what is that anyway? Is that the author? Who is she? Inundated Matthew with questions for Harris as soon as he entered the building. I don't know what's going on myself. The girl's been sitting in a mask for an hour and she's not going to take it off. Annoyed, Harris answered him. The girl cares a lot about remaining anonymous. Maybe she's some kind of celebrity, Matthew asked. Harris noticed that this behavior of the girl irritated him. He wanted to see her face even more. To avoid answering awkward questions, the girl suggested Will go get something to eat. The kid happily agreed to her suggestion. I have a lot of respect for those people who wear suits like that at work all the time. They're real heroes, Viola said aloud, stepping out into the hallway and removing her mask. Will is such a sweet kid unlike his uncle, noted the girl. So you decided to show your face after all, Viola heard the principal's voice behind her. The girl hurriedly put the mask on. You won't deign to show your face after all? Will you not make concessions to us, even though we have bought all your books, paid for this event? Harris was indignant. The man approached the writer with quick steps. Uncle, Viola heard a child's voice. She was immensely pleased at this turn of events. What are you doing here? Directly inquired the little one. Harris turned toward the child, standing with his back to the writer. The girl quickly put her mask on the principal and with a loud stomp hurried away. That woman is mad, thought to himself Harris, removing the mask. Oh crap, I didn't get to say goodbye to Will, thought Viola on the run. But that's okay. Sophie was supposed to take care of that. In Viola's eyes, everything went well, and thankfully it was already over. Now the girl could go back to her normal life. In the car, everyone rode in silence. Harris was annoyed by the situation. Matthew decided to keep quiet so he wouldn't accidentally get the hot hand. Ugh, I finally got some sleep, joyfully exclaimed the girl, rising from the bed. It had been a wonderful morning. It had been a long time since the girl had been this happy. Still, it's good to live a stress-free life with a pure heart. The happy girl entered the office and wished all the employees a good morning. Suddenly, her mask from yesterday came out to meet her. I must be imagining it, thought the girl, wiping her eyes. The principal walked into the office, carrying her yesterday's mask in his hands. There was an uncomprehending buzz in the office. Viola could hardly believe what was happening. Damn, and why on earth did he bring it here? Is this going to be his head mascot now? How could I have failed to notice over the years that my headmaster is a bit of a one? Dejectedly, the girl thought to herself. She pulled herself together and brought the principal his daily morning glass of water. When the girl entered the office, the principal slammed his fist on the masked man's head with a swing. Trying to suppress the trembling in her hands, Viola set the glass on the desk. Mr. Green, did you manage to find the writer after all? Viola asked the principal. Yes, I found her, but I was unable to socialize or even see her face. The problem is that she ran away. The supervisor confessed to her. Ran away, that's how, unexpectedly. Viola continued to play her part. Well, I guess I'll be going. There's a lot of gathering from work. Hurriedly, the girl left the office. With a glaring look, the director watched the departing girl. Her behavior seemed strange to him. The figure of his secretary looked very much like that of the writer. Miss Lehman, the superintendent called out to the girl. The latter froze in place. Your perfume. The superintendent stepped close to the girl. What's that smell? Asked Harris. The girl admitted that she doesn't use toilet water. Therefore, she didn't know what to answer him. Okay, then you can go, said the principal, and the girl happily jumped out of the office. Viola pressed herself against the door and thought that from such tension, she would soon have a nervous breakdown. You mean she doesn't use anything? She smells just like the mask, the headmaster said quietly, looking Viola in the trail. There, and now he wants to find the owner of the mask, narrated Matthew to the female employees. The girls noted that the whole story sounded rather romantic. He's like a prince, looking for his Cinderella now, only not for the slipper but for the lost mask, Maria exclaimed excitedly. Viola was sketching in a notebook. There, her character Harry was looking for a girl who had accidentally dropped her mask. The girl thought maybe she should quit her job and write a sequel to her book. The girl heard her name called. Her help was needed. Viola quickly slammed her notebook shut and ran to the call. It was Matthew who needed her help. The girl confessed to him that she hadn't expected to see how much her boss cared for her nephew. She hadn't pictured him as loving and caring. Matthew confided to the girl that the author of the book had unexpectedly run away. Will was very upset about it. He has not left his room for a couple of days and does not want to talk to anyone. I wonder what will happen if the principal does find the writer. As if offhandedly, Viola asked Matthew. I think he'll hire her, Matthew replied. Sophie received a new message on her phone. The publisher was extremely surprised since it was Matthew writing it. He was offering to call Sophie to chat with her. This was something Harris had asked him to do. Through the publisher, he wanted to reach the writer. Sophie agreed to a phone conversation. Matthew confided in her that he wouldn't leave her alone until she gave the writer's number. I'll agree to anything. I'll even go on a date with you. With desperation in his voice, Matthew said into the phone. Sophie had been laughing for a couple minutes and couldn't calm down. Tears were streaming from behind her eyes. She said that no matter how tempting the offer sounded, she would refuse. Matthew was already on the verge of a nervous breakdown. If you ever get the urge to go on a date with me, by all means, call me, Matthew told her. Bowing his head low, Matthew headed for the chief's office. He was going to have to admit defeat. The thoughts in the guy's head were not the brightest. Passing by Viola's desk, he noticed her brown notebook. The girl almost never parted with it. She was making some sketches in it. Matthew knew that Viola dreamed of becoming an artist. Matthew was curious as to what the girl was drawing. He opened the notebook and flipped through a few pages. There were the same drawings as in the children's book. Matthew quickly slammed the notebook shut. He was very sorry for going through other people's things. Now he didn't know what to do with the information he had gotten. I wonder why Viola draws such drawings. What does she have to do with a children's book? We must find out from her about it immediately. And what are you doing here? Rumbled the supervisor's voice behind Matthew's back. I'm nothing, just standing here waiting for Viola. Suppressing the panicked notes in his voice, said Matthew. Stand back, let me see. The principal motioned Matthew with his shoulder. He opened a brown notebook and began to look at the drawings. Matthew watched the supervisor's actions from behind him. Get me the editor-in-chief on the phone right away, ordered Harris. Good afternoon, this is Harris Green, Sophie heard in the receiver. He told the publisher that there was no point in hiding the writer's real name anymore. After all, his subordinate Viola Lehman had admitted to being the author of the book. Sophie didn't know what to answer. She just remained silent into the phone. Harris said that by her silence, she was confirming this information. He thanked her and hung up. Strange. And where did I make my notebook? The girl was surprised not to find the brown notebook in her purse. She had the inspiration to write a couple chapters today. The phone rang on the desk. It was Sophie's. Viola, I'm so sorry, please, shouted Sophie into the phone. The girl was getting all cold inside. A bad feeling appeared. Your boss, he found out, Sophie continued to yell. Wait, don't yell. What did you just say? Viola tried to keep her cool. The girl imagined herself writing a letter of resignation. The job was certainly prestigious, well paid, but she would hardly be able to work there further. The girl never thought that the reason for her dismissal would be so stupid. The only thing that stopped Viola from quitting was that her mother would not understand her. She would make her daughter go back to her job and beg to be hired back. The girl was distracted from her depressing thoughts by the ringing of the doorbell. Viola decided that it was a long-awaited parcel. She went to the door and looked through the peephole. Standing outside the door was Matthew. What on earth is going on here? Why did he come here? What does he want from me? All these questions whirled through the girl's mind. She was very reluctant to open the door, but Matthew was persistent enough. The girl opened the door ajar, not removing the chain. She hoped Matthew would leave soon. Please open the door. We need to talk to you. Behind Matthew's back stood her supervisor. Harris and Matthew sat silently across from the girl and glared at her. Miss Lehman? The principal decided to break the silence after all. He noted that the girl looked slightly different outside of work. And actually, we're not at work right now, so it doesn't matter what I look like or what I'm wearing. You're the one who showed up unannounced at my house at a rather late hour. That might be a little inappropriate, mumbled the girl. Miss Lehman, you know perfectly well why we're here, don't you? Why don't you raise your head and look at us? The principal inquired of her. Mr. Green, how do I know why you came to see me? Viola tried to pull herself together. Why did you hide everything? Why did you keep quiet until the last minute about being the author of a children's book? You knew we were looking for her, asked Viola Harris. Don't worry, I'll write my resignation tomorrow morning, bowed her head, said Viola. Harris and Matthew were surprised at this turn of events. "Were you afraid to confess to me because you thought I would fire you?" questioned Harris. "Not really. More because I ignored you while you were looking for me. On top of that, I was the reason Matthew was doing pointless and hard work. Also, I got scared and put a mask on you and ran away." Bowing her head, Viola admitted, "Also, my book is something akin to a personal diary. I didn't want anyone to reveal me at all. And lastly, pardon me for being blunt, but I don't want to have any kind of relationship with you after hours." Viola decided to be blunt to the end. "I certainly wanted to meet the writer, but just to talk, and I wasn't thinking of any relationship," Harris thought to himself with a smirk. "You know, and I'm surprised you don't want to form any kind of relationship with me. After all, your book makes me think differently, and on top of that, there is me in that book, under the name of Harry," said the principal, putting the book down in front of Viola. "No, you don't. That's a silly thing to make up. I just opened the list of male names and picked one at random, so the character in question has nothing to do with you." Viola tried to justify herself. "Well, then I'll help you find that connection," the headmaster said menacingly and slammed his fist on the table. "Thank you very much, Mr. Green. That won't be necessary," attempted to calm him down Viola. "You remember my nephew Will. After my sister died, he had no relatives left but me. To make him happy, I would do anything," Harris confessed to her. "A children's book author could make Will happy for a moment. That's why I sought out the writer. Now I'm going to try to keep her at all costs." Harris continued to explain to her. "I'm flattered, of course, that your nephew liked my book, but I'm only an author, nothing more. The fact that my work has fans only tells me that I should keep writing." "Are you implying that you plan to publish a second installment?" Harris asked her. "To talk further about the relationship doesn't make sense. I understand you want a kind of friendship with me for Will's sake, but there should be a relaxed atmosphere between friends. In our case, that's impossible." Coughing, said Viola. "I see," said Harris and got up from the table. Already on the threshold, Harris abruptly turned to Viola and asked her what type of men she liked. "To be honest, I like men who are kind and helpful. They have to be caring towards me and polite." "I'll write that down," said Harris as he left her apartment. When everyone came out, Viola's legs gave out. She sat down on the floor. Her heart was racing. She had absolutely no idea what had just happened. Harris in the car was extremely angry. It seemed to Matthew that his boss was about to burst into flames. "Matthew, answer me this. What am I like as a boss?" Suddenly the chief asked him. "You're a great boss. You've always made sure your subordinates work in a comfortable environment. You give your all to your work. That's why our company is the best." "Matthew, I think this speech is one you've clearly rehearsed." Looking at his subordinate spitefully, Harris said. He asked the guy to forget about being his boss. Harris told him to tell only the truth. "Okay, I'll tell the truth. You are quite fastidious, a perfectionist. You work very fast, and that's what you demand of your team. But people don't always keep up with you, and when they make mistakes, you get angry." Matthew blurted out. "You see how much you would have had to keep silent if I hadn't asked you to answer honestly." With irony in his voice, Harris said, "Even take Miss Lehman. Everyone will say she's a great expert. It took her a very long time to adjust to you. I'm not surprised that she doesn't like you. I suggest we end the revelations already." Matthew summarized his words. "Am I really that hopeless?" Matthew's words saddened Harris. Viola lay in bed, replaying the events of last night in her head. She really didn't want to go to work. The phone rang. Her boss had been calling her since morning. The girl was so scared that she threw the phone on the floor, but immediately she realized her blunder, picked up the phone from the floor, and answered the call. "I hope you're awake by now. Come out in 20 minutes. Sleepily, Viola didn't realize what the supervisor wanted from her. "You know I don't like employees to be late for work, so I'll pick you up and we'll ride together," said the supervisor into the phone to a frightened Viola who was silent. A car pulled up to the girl, with Matthew sitting behind the wheel. He motioned for her to get in the back seat. The girl opened the back door and smilingly said hello to the principal. He asked her to stop fidgeting and get in the car. Viola felt extremely awkward in this situation. In the office, rumors spread extremely quickly, so already in the morning, everyone knew that their boss had given some girl a ride to work. "We must be having an office romance in the office," said Maria to Viola. You can imagine the HR department promised that they will definitely find out who she is. And you know they're persistent. They won't let up until they know the truth. But you're his secretary. Try to find out somehow tactfully. Maria went on to say, "Do you really think that if I ask him, he will give me a frank answer?" Viola asked her. "Ask what?" asked Viola from behind the principal's back. The girl said it was just ordinary gossip. It was absolutely none of his business. She suggested to sort out the immediate problems, to consider the plans for today. "Why is he so silent? I'll soon earn a heart attack because of him," the girl thought to herself, looking into the diary. "Viola, where do you usually have lunch?" the director asked the girl. "In the cafeteria next to the office," uncomprehendingly Viola replied. "Great, then I'll go along with you. I think it's a good idea to make sure my employees are eating quality food," said Harris and walked into his office. "Yes, this is the best boss on earth," Maria said admiringly. "Well, since it's customary to stand in line here, I'll get in line," said Harris and stood behind Viola. "Miss Lehman, you've put so little food on your plate. Are you sure you have enough?" Harris peered over his shoulder into Viola's plate. "Mr. Green, don't worry about me. I eat what I want, as much as I want, and I'll die young." Viola thought that if the director kept eating lunch with her, she would definitely get an ulcer. There were many employees in the cafeteria. They were extremely surprised to see their boss here. There were whispers everywhere. Subordinates were discussing the situation. Viola did not like this situation. She was very uncomfortable. Harris smiled at Matthew and asked him to take the yellow folder from his desk. "He's weird today, and he's also smiling so creepily. The boss's behavior is creeping me out today," Matthew thought to himself. Harris remembered how Viola had behaved at lunch today. He had found the girl quite amusing. He used to think she was always collected and calm, but recent events had shown that she was quite different. The next day, Harris again decided to give Viola a ride to work. The girl didn't want her boss to give her a ride. Viola was afraid of gossip at work. She quickly packed up and ran out of the driveway. Through the window, Harris noticed the girl running. "Notice, Matthew, and Miss Lehman is a pretty fast runner. You take your time today, drive slowly. We'll take a detour today," asked Harris of the driver. "Miss Lehman, I need you today. My college friend's father just died. I need you to help me find a black tie quickly." "Yes, sir," shouted the girl to him. As he unbuttoned his gray shirt, Harris wondered if all secretaries were trained for the army, or if he was the only one. A few minutes later, Viola entered the office with a black tie in her hand. For a moment, she stood still. Harris stood in the office, naked to the waist. He pulled off his shirt. "Oh, I'm sorry," said the girl, and quickly threw her tie on the supervisor's desk. She turned around and hurried away. Harris stopped the girl. He asked her to help him with his tie. "Don't you know how to tie ties?" Viola asked him irritably. "You seem to be extremely uncomfortable with the situation," the supervisor remarked. Without turning back at him, Viola asked him to tell her when he was dressed. "I'm done," the principal announced loudly. "Would you mind bending over slightly?" Viola asked the principal. Harris was tall, so it was uncomfortable for the girl to tie her tie. The man leaned over and looked the girl in the eye. Viola was slightly embarrassed. She froze in place for a few seconds. "I'm waiting." The principal's voice brought Viola to her senses. She apologized and quickly tied her boss's tie. "That's it, Mr. Green. Tie is tied. You are free to go. Have a safe trip," Viola said to the principal. At the door, Harris turned to the girl and said with a sly squint of his eyes that he knew how to tie a tie himself, after all. Harris noted that the girl was even more naive than he had thought. Viola had only one wish, to strangle the chief with his own black tie. There was a lot of work to do lately, so Harris decided to stay late at work. Harris went up to the roof to get some fresh air and recover. "Yay, fresh air, great, stress relief." Harris heard a woman's joyful cry beside him. Harris looked out from around the corner. His secretary had come out onto the roof. She was looking for something in her pocket. Could it be cigarettes? Harris thought. He was against smoking. From her pocket, the girl took out a bar of chocolate. "Harris Green, I will destroy you!" shouted the girl, clutching the chocolate bar in her hand. "Yeah, this is going to take longer to get close than I thought," Harris thought to himself. The girl heard rustling around the corner. She realized she was not alone on the roof. "Please don't!" Viola heard a woman's voice. Harris tensed up too. It appeared there was someone else on the roof besides them. The girl was trying to break free from the gray-haired man's grasp. "Michelle, you do realize there's something between us, so maybe stop playing hard to get," the gray-haired man asked the girl. You do realize you're on probation, right? And as soon as I want to, I'll immediately whisper to the principal to take you on permanently. You do realize that your future career depends on me, don't you? The gray-haired man continued. Of course, rumors have reached me, but I didn't believe it. Perhaps I should intervene, thought to himself Harris. But Harris didn't have time to take any action. Viola came flying out from around the corner and pounced on the man. Mr. Jones, you do realize that this behavior could be considered sexual harassment, don't you? Viola asked indignantly. The man began to shout angrily, making excuses that he was simply misunderstood. What do you think you're doing? You're just an ordinary secretary. Suddenly, the man boiled up and swung around to hit Viola. You are correct, I am a secretary. I see the principal every day, so I can tell him about your behavior at any time. Chasing every word, Viola replied. The man got angry but was afraid to mess with the secretary. He turned around and walked away. The girl cried and thanked Viola for her help. Viola asked her to go to the HR department and tell them what had happened. When the girl left, Viola sank to the floor. The horror of what had happened gradually began to dawn on her. The girl realized that the man could easily have hit her. Why, you're also brave, mentally praised Viola Harris. The next morning, Viola decided not to run away. She drove to work in her boss's car, and the subway station flashed outside the window. The girl asked Matthew to drop her off. Miss Lehman, you realize, of course, that this isn't a cab. You can't just ask the driver to drop you off wherever you wish, the supervisor said in a cold voice. I understand that perfectly well, but I don't want the staff to see that I'm getting a ride from the director. I don't want any unnecessary talk. The girl was indignant. Miss Lehman, I don't care about any rumors the staff might spread about me. In a calm voice, Harris replied. Well, I do care about them. I don't want people talking about me, screamed Viola. As soon as the car stopped, the girl jumped out of it and ran toward the subway station. Harris noticed that Viola had begun to act differently. Matthew, on the other hand, suggested that her boss was probably to blame. You know, and Mr. Jones quit for some reason. I'm not too worried about it. There were all sorts of rumors about him, but he left pretty quickly. Told Maria the latest news. Viola's cell phone rang. The director wanted to see the latest documents on his desk. The girl really wanted to ask the principal why Mr. Jones quit, but she was worried that he wouldn't tell her the truth. Speaking of Mr. Jones, it was as if the principal had read her mind. I found out that he's a fan of getting loose at work, also started threatening things that belong to me, so I had to ask him to leave. Miss Lehman, do you have any plans for this Sunday? Suddenly the principal asked. You know, I wanted to go on a trip. Viola spoke first. I want to invite you to my house. As usual, not listening to the girl, said the principal. Damn, she won't even let me finish my sentence. Viola was indignant to herself. The thing is, I promised my nephew I'd turn Violet over to him, said Harris and jabbed a finger at the girl. The principal asked the girl if she would like to see her most loyal fan again. Of course I would like to see Will again, but you'll be there unfortunately, the girl thought to herself. Of course I'll pay for you to recycle this weekend, the principal continued. You know, instead of paying you, you better do me one favor, Viola asked the supervisor. Yeah, what's that? I'd like you to stop distracting me from my work. Also, stop coming to lunch with us. Please eat separately as before. Miss Lehman, you're contradicting yourself. You said yourself you like caring men. Is this my way of showing concern for you? Without raising his eyes to Viola, the boss said. Such revelations shocked the girl, but she pulled herself together quickly enough. In any case, I ask you to stop doing that. Okay, but if I agree to your terms, then I won't be able to look after you. Finally, the principal raised his eyes to Viola. Courting? What a load of crap. How do I explain to him that he has no chance of charming me? It's easier to make snowballs in hell. The girl thought to herself, but decided not to say it out loud. Let us do this. You will spend a little time with me every Saturday, and I promise to fulfill your conditions. The headmaster put forward his proposals. And why should I meet you every Saturday? The girl asked him. It's simple, so I can get to know you better, said Harris and stood up from the table. Okay, I agree. Viola decided that by socializing with the principal on Saturdays, she would hide the fact that Harris was trying to court her from her staff. But your nephew must be present at each of our meetings. Viola put forward her conditions. All right, so be it, after thinking for a couple of seconds, said the principal. Now I will get down to my work. Try not to distract me, said Viola and headed towards the exit. A car pulled up to Viola. The girl decided to herself that she would only meet her boss a few times. After that, she would tell him that she was not interested in him, and there was nothing she could do about it. It is not worth developing a relationship if there are no feelings. Matthew was sitting behind the wheel of the car. Viola didn't like the fact that an outsider would know about her arrangements with the principal. Matthew brought Viola to the entrance and told her that the director's apartment was on the 20th floor. He would not go upstairs. The girl rang the doorbell. On the threshold, she was met by a nice elderly woman. It was Will's nanny. The apartment was huge, but despite its size, it seemed cozy. Will's nanny shouted loudly that Mr. Green had a visitor. Harris met her in a disheveled state and homemade clothes. It was unusual for Viola to see the principal not in his classic suit. From behind Harris's back, little Will looked at Viola with big, frightened eyes. "Will, say hello. You wanted to meet her, didn't you?" said Harris, patting the child on the head. "Hello, Will. Don't be afraid because we already know you," said Viola, smiling at the baby. "That wasn't her. There was another one there," exclaimed the child. The girl asked Harris where the big mask was. He confessed that he had left it at work. "Don't you recognize me?" the girl asked Will. "Is there any way for me to prove to you that it was me?" Viola picked up a pencil and started sketching on a sheet of paper. "Great, you drew us!" the child exclaimed joyfully. "Now do you believe me that I am the author of the book, and it was I who created your favorite characters?" Laughing, Viola asked. "Yes, now I believe you." Will grabbed Viola's hand and pulled her into his room. He wanted to show her how he lived. Harris was surprised that Viola had hit it off so quickly with the boy. In the most prominent place in Will's room was her book, The Masked Girl. "Would you like me to show you how to draw?" Will asked. The girl replied that she would love to see his art. Harris appeared in the doorway of the room. He ordered everyone to quickly go wash their hands as they sat down at the table. The table was teeming with various viands. Everything looked like a small feast. Viola even felt a little uneasy about it. "Listen, are you going to be my aunt now?" Will asked Viola with childlike directness. Viola glared in Harris's direction. He pretended not to hear the question. "Well, look, in the beginning you came to us, said hello. Then you came to play with me, and now we're eating together." The child decided to explain to her. Viola glanced towards Harris, expecting some sort of reaction from him. "You see, I'm just a regular girl off the street. I can't be your aunt." Viola tried to gently explain to the child why she refused to become his relative. The girl said goodbye to the child and hurried home. But seeing his distressed face, she couldn't help herself and promised to come again. "Miss Lehman, wait!" Harris appeared in the doorway with a piece of paper. "Why am I not in this drawing?" Viola had to stay a few more minutes to finish drawing her boss in the drawing. Eventually, the drawing turned out quite harmonious. Gradually, Viola's life began to get better. The director no longer picked her up. She took the bus to work. The director ate lunch at restaurants as before. He no longer wanted to go to the cafeteria with her. The only thing was that he started asking her strange questions. What her favorite color was, what kind of movies she watched, what kind of food she liked. This was pissing Viola off a little too. The long-awaited Friday came, but that didn't make Viola happy. The principal called her to the movies and would not accept any objections. "Oh shit," Viola heard at a neighboring table. It was her coworker and good friend Maria who said tiredly. "What's wrong?" Viola asked. "I don't know what to do. I have to run home right away. I promised my mom to help with the guests, but I have one job to do urgently and I'm not likely to make it in half an hour." With bitterness in her voice, her friend confessed. Viola realized that if she didn't do it today, she'd be in trouble from her bosses on Monday. She offered her help. "Miss Lehman, are you ready yet?" Harris Green appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Green, looks like you'll have to go to the movies without me. I haven't had a chance to do my work yet." "What work? What are you doing now?" asked Harris, walking up to her desk. The girl admitted that she was preparing the papers the lawyers were requesting for Monday. "But I gave you no such order," Harris said in surprise. "You see, the job in question was not assigned to me, but the employee performing it has been away for family reasons. And as a loyal employee, I can't leave the company without important documents," Viola said with a soft smile. "I get it. You just don't want to go to the movies with me," Harris said in a calm voice. The girl said of course not. She really wanted to go, but she couldn't make it. Well, since you want to go so badly, I'll make arrangements with the lawyers. You don't have to do the work, suggested Harris to her. The girl again objected that there was no need to do such a thing. She'd rather make everything a deadline. Why touch the lawyers already burdened with their work? To be honest, I didn't expect such hard work from you. And such dedication to the company. I'm pleased to see you care about its well-being, said Harris and pulled a stack of papers from his briefcase. Harris threw the stack of papers on the table in front of Viola. He asked for these papers to be ready by Monday. But there's a week's worth of work here. Finding herself in slight shock, Viola said, I believe that with your passion for your work and unrivaled skills, you'll surely get it done by Monday. Have a great weekend, Miss Lehman, said the principal, and headed for the door. Viola stayed late at work until late afternoon. She was very tired and wanted to go home soon. Walking towards home, Viola noticed a small coffee shop. Nothing bad will happen if I go in and have a couple of drinks, the girl thought to herself. What on earth does he allow himself? Who is he to me anyway? The girl began to feel sorry for herself after having another drink. I wonder who can call me so late? Surprised, Harris looked at the ringing phone. Coming home, Harris was extremely angry. He was annoyed that between recycling and going to the movies with him, Viola had chosen the latter. The phone kept ringing. Harris decided to pick it up after all. He wondered what Miss Lehman wanted from him at this late hour. Hello, shouted the girl into the receiver. You're a creep. You're the worst person in the world. Who do you think you are? Miss Lehman, you must have just gotten drunk, Harris asked, after listening to the torrent of insults directed at her. Ha, drunk. I'm still drinking, Viola exclaimed happily. Tell me please, where are you now? Harris asked her in a calm voice. Where am I? I won't tell you. Viola laughed and took another drink. Mr. Green, why don't you just leave me alone? I just want to work for this company and nothing more. Harris, you're a real creep. The diner hostess took the phone from Viola and said into the receiver that the lady had just fallen asleep. The hostess asked who Harris was to her. If he's her boyfriend, have him come and get her. The girl was unlikely to get home on her own. Yeah, she didn't get far from the office, Harris thought as he looked at the sleeping Viola. Miss Lehman, wake up, said Harris, patting the girl on the shoulder. Oh, look who's here, exclaimed the girl, opening her eyes. Have you come to hassle me again? Do you think I'm going to put up with all this? Viola said in a drunken voice. Shit, what am I doing here? I'll regret it later, Harris thought to himself dejectedly. With hardly any luck, Harris managed to get the girl into the car. Miss Lehman, wake up. Remind me of your address. The girl didn't react to Harris in any way. Viola was sound asleep. Viola woke up with a wild headache. She was very thirsty. What a funny dream I had. As if I could say everything I think about him to the principal's face. Viola thought to herself without opening her eyes. A soft snoring sound was heard next to her. Viola turned her head and saw Will lying in the bed next to her. The boy was sound asleep. With a cry of, "Where am I?" the girl sat up sharply in the bed. "Good morning, Viola," said the awakened Will. The girl had absolutely no idea what she was doing in the Harris house. "I'm sorry to wake you up, but could you tell me what happened yesterday?" asked Viola of the boy. "Yesterday, my uncle brought you into our house in his arms. That's the way they carry princesses in fairy tales," replied the child to her, rubbing his eyes. Harris entered the room. He was glad to see that the girl was already awake. Viola bowed her head to him and apologized for being rude. Harris said he took no offense at her words, asked if she remembered anything. The girl had to admit that she remembered almost nothing of last night. "So last night you confessed your love for me. You said you secretly dreamed of starting to date me, and then marry me." Harris began to outline his version of the evening. "Don't talk nonsense, I said no such thing!" The girl was indignant, to which Harris parried that how could she assert such a thing if she remembered nothing. "All right, I do remember some things, and I'm very ashamed of my behavior." Bowing her head, Viola admitted. She promised Harris that she would write a letter of resignation today. "And you're so one-sided in dealing with your problems. Anything goes wrong, you just quit," Harris told her. "How many times do I have to tell you that I'm not going to fire you? Let's go get some breakfast. You'll feel better right away." Heading towards the kitchen, said Harris. "By the way, you probably forgot, but it's Saturday." The table was once again teeming with many different dishes. Harris asked Viola if she had any plans for the rest of the day. Well, since I haven't finished my work that you gave me yesterday, I will send my office out after lunch and continue working. Viola answered him. Then I will ask you again, hiding his irritation, Harris asked. Would you rather go to the movies with me or to work? I choose the movies, accepting the inevitable, Viola said. Excellent choice, said Harris with a smile. Harris wanted to buy tickets, but they were already sold out. He said that if the girl had agreed earlier, they would have been able to go to the movie. Oh, that's okay, we'll go next time. Viola was glad to hear that. Harris turned to the boy and asked him to choose where they would spend the rest of the day today. Will suggested, watching some movie in their home theater. Together with Viola, they went to pick out a movie for tonight. Harris really did have a home theater at home. It surprised Viola with its size. At least I won't have to talk to him during the movie, the girl thought to herself. While the movie was going on, Viola and Will fell asleep. On Monday morning, Harris got dressed as usual and went to the office. In the office, Viola was already waiting for him, ready to work. She pulled out her day planner and quickly told her boss the plan for today. Have you noticed that Mr. Green is kind of strange today? Maria asked Viola. Viola also noticed that the supervisor was a little distracted, but she didn't tell Maria about it. No sooner had Viola touched her food on her lunch break than the phone on the desk vibrated. It was a call from the Ashen Company. Their CEO was on his way to the office. Viola was asked to meet him at the entrance. Ashen's CEO arrived 2 hours early, but Viola had no choice but to go out and meet him. And a tall, broad-shouldered, brown-haired man walked into the office. The whole team said hello to him in a friendly voice. And for some reason I thought your office was bigger, Director Ashen said in a disgruntled voice. Viola offered him a seat in the waiting room. The director didn't like being made to wait here instead of in their superior's office. The girl had a bad feeling about this gentleman. She did her best to hide her negative emotions behind hospitality. Some kind of commotion was heard in the waiting room. Viola hurried there. Their guest was yelling at Maria. The girl accidentally doused him with coffee. Viola hurriedly hushed up the unpleasant situation. She offered to give the suit to the dry cleaner. What dry cleaning this suit is a limited edition suit. It's worth a crazy amount of money. The director of Ashen met and poured the rest of the coffee on Viola's head. Viola had worked for this company for years, but this was the first time she had seen such treatment. She felt sad, hurt, and lonely. There was no way she could protect herself from this guest. We'll have to go to that restaurant again. I had such a delicious meal, Matthew rambled happily. In the hallway, he spotted Maria. She was sitting outside the waiting room crying bitterly. What happened? And where is Miss Lehman now? Inquired Matthew. Maria revealed that Viola had stayed in the waiting room. An angry Harris flew into the waiting room. Mr. Green, how unfortunate that our meeting has been marred by such unpleasant circumstances. I would like to point out that you need to do a better job with your secretary. Not only am I being doused with coffee, I'm being interrupted. What the hell do you think you're doing? Roared Harris. Bastard! Shouted Harris and tried to punch the Ashen executive in the face. Don't! Screamed Viola and hung onto the supervisor's arm. You're a real thug, exclaimed their guest. This man is not worth getting into serious trouble with the law later. I'm asking you to calm down, Viola pleaded with Harris. Harris heeded the girl's words. He relaxed his hands. Harris motioned for Viola to follow him. Harris and Viola walked out of the waiting room. Matthew promised that he would take care of everything himself next. Harris and Viola went up to the roof of the building. The principal took a deep breath to calm himself. Why did you just stand there and put up with all of this? Turning his head to Viola, Harris asked. What was I supposed to do? What kind of fight back could I have given him? Question for question, the girl answered. The girl began to make the excuse that that was the guest as well, and she was usually the secretary. If she started to stand up for herself, it could have been detrimental to the company, so it was easier for her to just keep quiet. Harris slapped his palm sharply on the wall beside her. The girl was startled. Miss Lehman, Harris started to say, but the girl interrupted him. She said she was disgusted with his behavior. If she deals with aggressive guests by force, she doesn't want to see aggression from her boss. She gets scared when he starts acting that way. Harris lowered his hand. So it turns out, you're actually just afraid of me. With a sadness in his voice, Harris said, and allowed the girl to leave. Viola planned to take the day off today. Yesterday's stress was making itself felt. The girl didn't want to do anything. She had a dream of just spending the day at home. The doorbell rang. Viola was not expecting guests so early. She even wondered who could come to her at 6 o'clock, 30 minutes in the morning. She looked through the peephole, but there was no one in the hallway. Viola decided that it was probably just a wrong door. Viola decided to look outside. There was a bright lettuce bag hanging on the doorknob. It contained a bowl of oatmeal, vitamins, and some aspirin. So you just hung the bag on the door? Why didn't you hand it to me? That would have been so much cooler. It's important for girls to be taken care of personally. Giving advice to Principal Matthew. To be honest, I was worried she'd be uncomfortable after yesterday. I scared her with my behavior yesterday. You know, I never thought you'd be worried about that. The next day, Viola went to work. She made it a goal that as soon as she saw the principal, she would immediately thank him for showing her concern. "Mr. Green, about yesterday?" the girl began, but the principal walked past her without slowing his step. He acted as if he didn't notice his secretary. "Okay, next time he's probably really busy." The girl consoled herself by looking after the principal. "You're dismissed for the day. And by the way, about Saturday, you don't have to come." Without looking at the girl, the principal said, "Well, how about the next one?" Viola didn't understand why the principal was acting like this. His demeanor changed drastically. "You don't need to come in on Saturdays anymore at all." Viola walked around the office and pondered Harris's behavior. Since this was the end of it, she could go back to her old life. She would work at the same relaxed pace as before. Since there was no need to go anywhere this Saturday, she decided to make the day worthwhile. The girl started a general cleaning. The phone on the table played. The girl picked it up. Excited Will asked Viola to come urgently. The long-awaited Saturday came. Will woke up early to have breakfast as soon as possible. He was not patiently waiting for Viola's arrival. His uncle entered the room and mortified him with the news that Viola wasn't coming today. "You see, it's hard for Viola to set aside every Saturday for us, so I suggested she take a break for today." Harris came up with an excuse. Will seemed to believe it. Harris usually didn't feel this bad on this day. He lay on his bed, memories flooding back at him. The surgery had been going on for hours. Harris sat in the doorway, waiting with bated breath for it to be over. Tears streamed down his face. "We're sorry, but Mom..." Harris remembered how those words had stabbed his heart like a knife. "Uncle, can't you help me?" Will asked and froze on the threshold of the rooms. His uncle lay unconscious on the bed. "Viola!" shouted Will and threw himself into the arms of the girl who entered. Viola tried to calm him down. She said that since she was already here, everything would be okay. Harris was feverish. Viola dampened a small towel and placed it on Harris's forehead. The girl thought that no matter how strong her boss looked, he was still susceptible to the common cold. Viola decided to dial Matthew. She figured she could use his help. "I forgot it's the 7th today. I'll be right over," said Matthew, jumping out of bed. He motioned for Viola to try and bring the fever down. Viola asked Matthew if she should call an ambulance. The guy pointed out that the boss's illness was more of a mental rather than physical nature. The girl agreed with him, absolutely not understanding what he was talking about. Harris began to rave. He called for some Stella, asked her to apologize. Tears were running down his cheeks. The girl crouched beside the bed, touched the director's hand. She whispered that everything was fine, no need to worry, everything will get better. Harris opened his eyes. Beside him, he heard someone's steady breathing. Viola was asleep with her face tucked into the bed. "What's the matter? Why am I falling asleep at every turn?" The girl jumped up. She remembered that she had come to help her boss, not to sleep it off. The girl touched Harris's forehead. Fortunately, the fever had already subsided. The man was not feverish. The girl leaned over the boss to listen to his breathing. Harris opened his eyes abruptly. The frightened girl bounced to the side, but the man managed to grab her arm. "I'm giving you a chance. I'm giving you a chance to run away from me," said Harris, snuggling up to the girl. The girl sat unmoving. She figured the principal was delirious again. A disheveled Will ran into the room. The boy threw himself into Harris's arms. He was glad that his uncle was feeling better. The child turned toward Viola and thanked her for her help. "Nonsense! You know I'll always come to your aid. You're my friend." Viola answered him and rubbed his cheek. "Will is right, Miss Lehman. You have been a great support to us. We are very grateful to you for that." Turned Harris to Viola. "Mr. Green, well then I should apologize to you. The last time we spoke I was unnecessarily harsh with you. Please accept my apologies." Well, since you are truly sorry for your behavior, then don't deny us, come back on Saturdays. Smiling, Harris said. That was mean, Viola thought to herself. Will shouted happily when he learned that the girl would be coming to them every week. Matthew joined them. He asked Viola if everything was okay. The girl replied that everything was fine. Harris was taking a shower right now. Matthew noticed a cake on the table. He asked Viola what the celebration was today. The girl admitted that she had bought the cake. Will told her that it was his mother's birthday. Matthew gloomed. The girl was afraid that she had made some kind of mistake again. You see, it's unlikely Harris would approve of something like this. It's more likely this cake will piss him off, whispered Matthew in her ear. But why? What happened that day? The girl asked Matthew. Viola promised that she would discuss the matter with Harris. The principal entered the room. He stood silently over the cake. Those present in the room held their breath. All right, let there be cake this year, the principal said in a calm voice. Viola and Will rejoiced and hurriedly decorated it with candles. Sophie's cell phone rang. It was her mom calling. She asked her daughter if she had plans for Sunday. She'd found the right match for her. Her daughter had to meet him. Sophie had to agree just to get her mom off her back. Sophie rattled the window and spotted a familiar silhouette. And standing at the stoplight was Matthew. Sophie quickly found his business card in her purse. After last Saturday, the principal had been acting even stranger. First of all, he was jealous of Viola and a co-worker. He didn't like the fact that he asked the girl for help. According to the principal, he should do everything himself. Also, the director started helping her carry heavy folders, which embarrassed the girl a little. At lunchtime, Viola decided to meet Sophie to tell her the latest news. Sophie noted that since the director was behaving like that with her, he probably had some plans for her. Sophie also decided to be frank. She said that her mother wants to introduce her to some guy, but Sophie has plans for another man. And who is this man? Do I know him? Viola shrieked, jumping up from her seat. Of course you know him, it's Matthew. Viola grabbed her friend's hand and told the latter that she would do her best to make sure they had a date. Yeah, what can I do for a publisher? Asked Matthew into the phone. I'm calling you to collect a debt. Have you forgotten? It's been 2 months, replied Sophie to him. There was a deal that if you got the name of the author of the book, you would call me for a date. The name is known, but the date never happened. In a calm voice, Sophie continued. Matthew suggested that Sophie meet at the park. Hi, Sophie, she heard Matthew's voice behind her. You're all here now, rejoiced the girl. But then her gaze traveled down a bit. Matthew wasn't alone. He had come for a date with a child. Forgive me, of course, but what's Will doing here? The girl pulled Matthew aside by the scruff of his neck. The guy admitted that it was the boss who made him babysit. The boss had plans today. Sophie had no choice but to agree to a threesome. She asked Will what the boy had plans for today. The child confessed that he wanted to go on the swings. Yay, we're going to spend the whole day on rides today, shouted Sophie excitedly. She grabbed the child's hand and ran toward the nearest carousel. Why are you frozen there? No lag behind, Sophie shouted to Matthew on the run. Classy woman, this is going to be an awesome day today, Matthew thought to himself and hurried after Sophie.